Maybe we can start with the question that I put to Ruth Marcus a few minutes ago, which is, I think, from a practical standpoint and an ideological, philosophical standpoint, one of the hardest things people in the press are facing today, which is how do you convince people who are predisposed because of ideology, resentment, philosophy, religion, tribe, region, whatever it is, predisposed not to believe things you in the press know to be true because you've studied it empirically. You're on the road a lot, talking to many, many Trump voters.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your experience in trying to convey the idea that the MSM is not the enemy of the people, to borrow a phrase.
Mm-hmm. Well, I begin everything by trying to reassure them that I'm not a hologram orchestrated by the Clintons.
Right.
That's not true. I don't do that. The first thing I would say, just in response to your question, is I'm not an advocate. I'm a journalist, right? So it's not that I'm trying to convince people of the righteousness.
No, but you're an advocate for the idea that the press stands for the truth, flawed, whatever, but stands for the truth.
So, and it is remarkable. You go to Trump events, you go to Trump rallies, and the resistance to what we think of as commonly shared facts is fairly profound on everything from family separation policies to airstrikes in Syria. I mean, there are a number of things where there literally exists an alternate reality where none of the things we know to be true are true. So in my questioning I think one of the things that you can't do when you're interfacing with Trump supporters or people who don't share these facts or a belief in these facts is not to put them on the defensive. I mean, my tact usually is to understand what they think to be true and then to sort of question them repeatedly about how for example, on family separation, someone said that was an Obama-era policy. And I sort of tried to dig into what exactly they thought Obama had done to dictate this policy, or how it was a vestige of the Obama administration. And if you ask people enough times, you eventually get to the kernel of the thing they think is true. And that is where it's easier to sort of debunk what is false. I mean, usually in all this theory making on the dark side of the internet or at Fox News, there's some sort of thing that a kernel of veracity around which an elaborate sort of fake theory has been built.
What part of the critique of the mainstream media emanating from Trump supporters from the right, what part do you actually agree with, if anything? Do you see some reason, some justifiable reason for people to have this resentment and mistrust, so on?
I think yesterday is a great case in point. There is a feeling on the part of Trump supporters and a lot of conservatives that the mainstream media does not cover legitimate wins. The renegotiating of NAFTA is a legitimate win for this White House. It has been completely overshadowed by the Kavanaugh confirmation. That's a function of the way media works and profits and ratings. But it also, I think, feeds this narrative that, look, even when he does something that's actually good and it is an accomplishment, it gets no coverage. And I do think, because most media is generated and is taped and is broadcast out of coastal cities like New York and DC, there is a lack of an understanding about what actually matters to people in the middle of the country and how they think about the world. I think we've tried to correct for that since 2016 because so much of us missed the story. But at the end of the day, if you don't live in Ohio, if you don't live in Missouri, if you don't live in Nevada, you're not going to understand the crosswinds in the same way. And that is not necessarily bias. That's a matter of fact. But if you overlay that with the stories we do cover and the importance we give them, I think it does give us, a sense of injustice in terms of whether we are fair in our coverage.
Right. Jeff, talk about the history a little bit of the partisan press. We feel as if we're in a hyper-partisan moment in American history, but the truth of the matter is, for much of American history, the press has been almost entirely partisan and divided, echo chambers and filter bubbles and all the rest in the pre-digital era. Talk about that and tell us if you see some cause for hope that we're maybe in a trough right now, but we go in and out of these things rather than being in a kind of terminal decline toward two camps that just do not accept any set of common facts.
The press of 1800 makes our current one seem mild. The insults that people hurled at each other, Thomas Jefferson and John Marshall calling each other the great llama of the mountain, and it's not clear what that means, to be a llama.
The great llama of the
mountain. Sounds like a compliment.
Isn't that shocking? No, it's the worst thing to be a llama. It's appalling. And Marshall twistifications and so forth.
I'm going to try that on Lindsey Graham tomorrow. See if it works. Yeah. You're the great llama of the mountain.
It had something to do with being in Monticello and looking down at everyone.
Like liberals in the ivory tower, or just the ivory tower.
Exactly.
The Llama Mountain.
And the duel of Burr and Hamilton was inflamed by stuff that was in the newspapers. And at the Constitution Center, we have the originals of the letters and so forth, and much of this ended up in the press. And the National Gazette, where Madison wrote his essays defending the Constitution, and remember the Federalist Papers originally appear in the newspapers, is a virulent anti-Federalist organ. At the same time, these things had limited reach and they were distributed slowly. So Madison, in his essays on national government in 1791, written in this partisan National Gazette, expresses the hope that at some point, an enlightened class of journalists that he calls the literati, basically it's the staff of The Atlantic, avant la lettre, that the literati will slowly disperse reason across the land, and that people will take the time to read complicated arguments, and this will obviate the dangers of the extended republic. The bad thing about having a really big country is that people can't discover facts. The good thing is that mobs can't formalize. He thinks because the press it's a mass circulation newspaper, but it travels slowly, all the partisan stuff will be mixed with these long, complicated arguments which people will take the time to read, and reason will prevail. The problem now is the speed of deliberation. I mean, this is we've been partisan before, the press has been partisan before, but we didn't have Twitter. Yeah. And the other obvious difference is now everyone is a journalist. And in many ways, that's a wonderful, empowering thing that everyone can express their opinions in real time, but it also allows for the quick formation of mobs in a way that has undermined the institutional media and makes things
It's a question for both of you, and it's a simple one. Can our form of democracy survive Twitter and everything it stands for?
It's a serious... You go first, because I want to think about
it. I think when we look back on the Trump presidency, assuming he is one day no longer president, I think that we will talk about a lot of things, but he did, one of the longest lasting pieces of his legacy may be the fact that he revolutionized the way presidents communicated with the American people. And his Twitter habits have changed our democracy. They've changed journalism in terms of what we cover. They've shifted the scale in terms of what's important. Trump's tweets can knock the most important sort of policy news or foreign news out of the ballpark immediately on any station around the country.
And he knows it. He's strategic.
And journalists are constantly forced into the position of defending why it's worth covering a tweet. And our position is usually, well, this is the President of the United States effectively.
It's a presidential statement.
It's a presidential statement. All right, that did not, Obama tweeted, but it was not with the same, he was not as promiscuous, he was not as...
Obama tweeted about national parks he was visiting.
Yeah, exactly. It was very strategic. Trump, it's like it is the closest thing we have to inside his brain, and therefore it is like but it is. I think it is very much
There's no filter, yeah.
There isn't. And that, I think the expectation, it will be interesting to see if the next president, whoever he or she may be, what he or she does with that medium. Because I feel like as complicating and difficult as it is for us to all navigate, it's an incredibly useful tool as well.
But Twitter is the opposite of a cooling mechanism.
It's
the heating mechanism. So can we survive it?
The most alarming Twitter study recently, a couple weeks ago, the Times published a survey showing that people who are exposed to the opposite point of view on Twitter become more polarized, not less. In other words, they dig in their heels, and it has to do with the way that people define themselves tribally. So the hope that by listening civilly to different points of view, people could collaborate is not true when the tweets are short and fast. in these kind of settings, when you bring together people of different perspectives, people can change their minds. And the coolest thing the Constitution Center does, the anti-Twitter, is this weekly podcast where I get to call up the leading liberal and conservative scholar of the week to debate the constitutional issues of the week. And we had the thrilling experience of having two scholars on treason, the liberal and conservative scholar, because the definition of treason is really wonky. You need giving aid and comfort to enemies, two witnesses, or confession in open court. Once the two sides debated it, the conservative decided there was a stronger case for treason against the president if the facts were proven than he had thought before hearing the arguments on the other side. So that suggests that when you take the time to disaggregate, and time, the central question is time, and I want to plug Greg Wiener's amazing book, Madison's Metronome, which notes the centrality of time in the framers' vision of deliberation. You have to slow things down so that people can take the time.
But this is quixotic. I mean, this is really quixotic what you're talking about. You're talking about a podcast with constitutional scholars.
Podcast is available on parchment. If you really want
That's right. That's right. That's right. It can be mailed to you, right? Compare that to the demagogues of the left and right and their instant ability to communicate to millions of people. It's not a fair fight, Jeff.
Well, that's where the institutions come in, and that's why you must have strong institutions of Congress to check the presidency and the Supreme Court to check the Senate and the House and the president and the executive. And if the institutions are doomed by Twitter, and we were just talking before about the ways that Twitter has undermined deliberations in Congress, the Supreme Court doesn't tweet, and the case for cameras in the courtroom is different because you'd have Justice Scalia, the late Justice Scalia said, if you could have federal marshals in every house forcing people to watch the entire argument from beginning to end, he'd support it. But he fears that little snippets of the arguments would be taken out of context. And now with Twitter, that fear becomes more real, that you could actually reduce the arguments to acontextual snippets. So the institutions are crucial, and I think that's the only thing they can say about it.
I guess to that point, though, I do worry that the institutions have realized the only way that they remain relevant and the people in those institutions retain their jobs is by inflaming passion. I mean, right? Look at Lindsey Graham, sitting on the Senate Judiciary Committee for a Supreme Court nomination, issues this sort of like dramatic monologue, the likes of which, I mean, he's not the kind of person that typically does that. It'll be interesting to see what you have to say to him tomorrow, but I think a lot of people believe, whether or not this is fair, that Donald Trump won 2016 because Hillary Clinton couldn't connect with voters. She didn't have the same emotional relationship. And so when you have institutions, whether the presidency or the Senate or to some degree the House, where success is predicated on making an emotional connection with the public and the electorate, why get rid of social media if it helps foster that connection?
So the looming question is our ability to snap back to previous norms. Correct? I mean, after the Trump presidency, do we just revert to form, or is the genie just out of the bottle?
As a member of the media, we talk about there is like this sort of dirty acknowledgement that Trump has been very good for the media because people are reading more, people are discussing more, people are tuning in more. It's hard to imagine the media saying at the end of this, and I think the voters have been inoculated to this as well, let's just take a break. Isn't it good to have everything reset to zero? I mean, everybody wants a break to some degree, but I don't know that you're gonna have like if politics goes back to the status quo pre-Trump, I don't know that anybody is going to be particularly actually relieved. I mean, I do think people, I don't know. I feel like there's an incredible appetite. I mean, it won't always be able to operate at this level of frenzy, but right. I don't know.
People like the circus. No, I mean, yes.
Like I said, the stakes feel incredibly high. People are incredibly invested, and that's legit. That has nothing to do with this other thing that I'm talking about, which is like the game of it all.
But Jeff, isn't there reason to hope in some way, and I'm putting my thumb on the scale of what I'd like to see return to, but that every presidency is a reaction to a previous presidency. You elect a certain kind of person, and you elect somebody who's very, very different. I mean, what are the chances that, looking back in history, what are the chances that the next president is the most boring person ever to achieve the highest office?
I mean, the contingency of history is so striking, and Buchanan followed by Lincoln, or the catastrophe of Johnson picked by accident and so forth. So anything's possible. the scary possibility, which we're talking about now, is are these changes structural? If Madison was right and it's direct democracy leads inevitably to demagogues, then the next president is as likely to be a celebrity liberal as a celebrity conservative.
Because I don't think Donald Trump is president because Barack Obama was boring. Right? I think that in terms of policy and other things, there's the sort of back and forth nature of America. But this other thing of the Trump presidency, which is frenzy, passions inflamed, like that's just a separate thing entirely. I think that exists as an inflection point in history, less than a natural sort of sine curve in terms of emotion.
We're going to do questions in a minute, but why do you two think that there has been quite obviously insufficient sanction for a president who, when a lie, an untruth, a misleading statement is pointed out, doesn't correct but doubles down? I mean, that's one of the innovations of this presidency, I would say. No. I mean, this is just observable truth. I mean, that all politicians lie. When you catch them on a lie, when we in the media catch them on a lie, they trim, they walk things back, they sometimes apologize. Here we have a system in which there's no quarter is given. And obviously, he's rewarded for this or insufficiently sanctioned. So where did it's not where the institutions fail, where did the norms fail? Were the norms insufficiently strong?
First of all, I do think it's partly institutional. I mean, I think that there is an entire wing of conservative media that doesn't ask him to fact check or correct himself, and his supporters watch and digest that news media, so they don't believe he needs to.
So as long as the base is fine.
As long as he's made a calculation. It doesn't matter what the mainstream fake news liberal voters think. It only matters what my people think and what the media they watch believes I should do. I mean, I do think if Fox News was issuing corrections about the thousands of lies this president has said publicly, that would be an issue for this White House, but they don't.
I think Alex has said something very important about the transformation of politics into emotion, and once the personal becomes political, people react to facts through their unconscious biases, or to use the fancy word, the availability heuristics. People tend to believe the tribe or person who they personally identify with. And as early as Jefferson, the founders understood the malleability of the difference between facts and opinions, but it becomes more important to support your camp than to consider facts on the other side, and that is a real problem for democracy.
Can I just use one example of that? Like the Kavanaugh, I keep going back to the Kavanaugh confirmation because I think it crystallizes so much of the dynamics in play. There is now a real question about whether a Supreme Court nominee perjured himself in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and that is being met with calls that the left is somehow moving the goalposts, which is a direct admission that somehow the truth is actually just a set of goalposts that can be moved here and there across the field.
I want to go to some question. Oh, you have something here? Please.
Hi, I'm Jean Golden. You talked about the current atmosphere being that of like a circus, and I can only agree with it, not because it's exciting, but I'm thinking of the Circus Act where someone's on a high wire without a safety net, because I'm anxious all the time, and I'm worried that our safety net, meaning, as you pointed out, the Congress not working as well or other parts of the government not working as well with checks and balances, just not functioning as a safety net for us. Thank you.
Is there a net, Jeff?
The net is the Constitution. The net is the Constitution. And the question is, will the Constitution save us if the courts are delegitimized? And it's impossible to understate the significance of the role that John Roberts is going to be playing in this new world. Because if we have a Supreme Court that is routinely overturning decisions by 5-4 votes, regardless of whether Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed or not, the court will appear to be illegitimate in the eyes of at least half the country. He's concerned about this. The justices are concerned about it. Justice Kagan just last week said the whole court's legitimacy depends on popular acceptance, and once that's gone, then the rule of law is under siege. So
Jeff,
it's a very serious
you're a
question.
Supreme Court expert. Let me ask you this directly. Did Brett Kavanaugh disqualify himself for the Supreme Court because he launched what I think everyone would agree, regardless of side, a fairly ferocious attack on liberals, the left, the Clintons, and so on, and the press.
As head of the Nonpartisan National Constitution Center, I can very strongly describe the arguments on both sides. There are arguments on both sides. The argument in favor of his disqualifying himself are that after that screed, he could never be accepted as nonpartisan in any case which involved the people that he denounced, and he will be asked to recuse himself, and that he will also be so angry that it's impossible to him to view things fairly, and for that reason, even if he's innocent of the charges, that he cannot function effectively as a judge. The argument on the other side is that Justice Thomas did go through similar allegations and made a similarly angry response. After he was confirmed to the court, he said, "I would have stayed only for 20 years, but now the liberals have pissed me off so much that I'm going to stay forever." And nevertheless, he's proved to be a judge respected and even much liked by his fellow justices, whose opinions have been distinctive, interesting, great to teach as a law professor, and have a strong amount to say for them as an example of constitutional originalism, and therefore his supporters would say that his anger has not influenced his jurisprudence. Those are the arguments on both sides.
Return to the idea, Dan Delury, want to return to the idea stated earlier that everything that a president, whether it's this president or any other president, says is therefore significant and important and must be covered. News editors every day make decisions on what news should be featured and printed as opposed to other news. And so why is it that whatever the president says, let's take tweets as an example, is significant that it has to be covered?
And in fairness, Trump tweets a lot. Not every tweet is covered. I think that there is some bar that it needs to clear, but you have to understand, people are fascinated by this president. They're enraged by him, they're abhorred by him, they adore him, but people feel very strongly about this president. So there's a very basic calculation that is made, and this is unfortunately a reality of our news media, about viewership and audience. They want to know, right? I mean, there is a circular, it is a snake eating its tail, right? Perhaps if they weren't fed so many Trump tweets, maybe they wouldn't care as much. But again, I mean, there is we go back to the basic calculation. Let's say it's an inflammatory tweet from the President of the United States talking about a policy that matters, or a Supreme Court justice, whatever it is. I mean, there is a feeling that that deserves to be covered, however, in whatever depth.
You know, in the two previous presidents I covered, they move around with stenographers, and the stenographers capture every word spoken by the president because it's the president of the United States. You could argue, as Alex does, that the tweets are actually more important because these are a direct window into what he's actually thinking in real time. This is the most powerful person in the world. This is the man who commands a nuclear arsenal that can destroy the entire world. These are presidential statements. These give us direct insight into how he's thinking, what he's doing, and I don't see any way around them. If these tweets were delivered serially and orally in a press conference, we would of course carry them live. So I can't imagine why we wouldn't focus on them and try to interpret them and understand what this means for his presidency and what it means for America.
Just a quick point to support the question. Brandeis, in his privacy essay, says, once gossip attains the dignity of print, it crowds out the space in the public mind available for discussions of matters of public concern. And that's what's going on. Now, it may be right as an editor, you can't ignore it, but unless the gatekeepers do ignore it, then we're reduced to seeing politics as personal.
I believe we have time for one more short question. Am I correct? Or there's somebody with a mic back here. Sorry, yes.
Hi, my name is Sergio Marzuach. I am from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I'm glad to be here. My question goes back to your prior statement about the change that Twitter and technology has had on politics. But if you look at American history, many presidents have tried to go above and beyond or around the media to reach the people. TR had the Baldy Pulpit, FDR the fireside chats, JFK, LBJ, Reagan had TV. So really, isn't the question more about the character of the person in the office than technology?
Well, I think like all of those sort of parallel mechanisms to communicate with the American public were considered. I mean, Obama went around the media all the time, and I can tell you someone covered the White House. We didn't love it, but that was a concerted effort to get their message communicated, and it was an orchestrated effort. The difference now is the tweets that are issuing forth from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, I mean, some of them are sent at 4 o'clock in the morning. They're misspellings. They feel off the cuff, completely immediate. They're really emotionally charged. They are not part of sort of considered dialogue with the American public, and that feels really new, and is, to your point, perhaps a reflection of the personal itself, right, of the politician itself. I don't know that there's any other politician or potential presidential nominee that would even think to issue the tweets that this president has. But nonetheless, it's changed the dynamic of like what is acceptable to issue forth to the American public.
To central point, and you could blame it all on the election of 1912. That was when, it all comes back to the progressive era and history, and when Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson ran against William Howard Taft, they insisted for the first time that the president was a steward of the people who should directly channel popular will, and Taft, the doomed constitutionalist, defending the old Madisonian vision that the president is accountable to the Constitution. Now, obviously, the technologies have changed. Twitter is quicker than the radio and the gramophone, but it's populism that is different. The difference between JFK and FDR, who were accountable to political parties, and Roosevelt and Trump, Theodore Roosevelt and Trump, both who were insisting that they alone represent the people and they alone can save it. So the combination of populism plus the new technologies is an explosive combination.
Jeff, Alex, thank you very, very much, and thank you all for being here.